so it's a lovely good evening and welcome to Ubuntu Channel's Meet Your Leaders program. I am your host, Lance Sani Banda, and of course, together with my co-host, Chaza, we take you through 55 minutes or more to discuss pertinent issues that we think is really good for the country, as well as a good discourse that we get to discuss right here. Our topic of discussion this evening is the Barotseland Agreement. Today, we are looking at the truths and deception about the Barotseland Agreement. And of course, our guest this evening on the program is Akashambatwa Mbikusita-Lewanika, or simply put, Bondate Aka. Good evening, Chaza. Welcome to the program, and it's good to have you on the program.
Good evening. Thank you, Lance, and it's good to be with you on the program, and good evening to the viewers.
All right, thank you so much. So Chaza will be able to join us with video shortly. He can't be on video due to little circumstances, but working on having him on video. So when you don't see video now, do not despair, as he will join us with video shortly. And like I introduced our guest this evening, allow me to simply address him as Bondate Aka. Bondate Aka, good evening and welcome to tonight's program.
Good evening, Lance.
Good to have you on the program.
It is an honor and a very welcome opportunity.
All right, thank you so much. So our dear listener and viewer, you will be part of the program by simply leaving a comment under this broadcast, whichever platform that you are using to watch us on, either Facebook, YouTube, as well as Twitter. And also we will share with you the studio link that you can use to join us into the studio and have a one-on-one interaction or chat as we get to talk about different things that affect you, our dear viewer. And this evening, like discussed, we are looking at the Barotseland Agreement of 1964, the truths as well as deception of this agreement. But before we get into that, let's get the portfolio for our guest this evening. Bondate Aka, please, let's get at least your portfolio to have our viewer understand who exactly you are.
You've come a bit late. I'm now portfolioless. I've had many portfolios. I don't want to take too much time relating them.
No.
So, but I've had many portfolios. Let's say, put it this way, I'm a perpetual student.
Okay.
Politics, on history, on economics, on Africa, on Pan-Africa, on the globe.
All right, pretty interesting. So quickly in getting into the topic of discussion, let's get into it in this way. We have been hearing, or this talk has been there about the Barotseland Agreement. It's been in public domain. Different people from all walks of life have been talking about the Barotseland Agreement for some time. And a lot of people have given their different opinions on this matter and on this agreement. Kindly help us understand something here. What was the major reason that led to the introduction, or simply put, the birth of the Barotseland Agreement?
Thank you very much. The first thing we have to understand is that we are all free to have our own opinions, but we are not free to have our own facts. So facts, the truth, the true history is not a matter of opinion. And part of the problem we have had is that there are too many opinions that don't bother to relate to the truth and to the facts. And there are too many opinions based on falsehoods and deceit and distorted history. So that an opportunity like we have now is an opportunity for us while acknowledging that everybody has a right to their opinion, to focus on the facts.
Mhm.
And to assist us to focus on the facts, we have to ask the standard questions. You know, what is or was the Barotseland Agreement?
Mhm.
Who entered into that agreement? Why did they enter into that agreement?
Mhm.
How did they enter into that agreement? When did they enter into that agreement?
Okay.
So those are, I think, some of the things that will lead us to establish the facts. First, with the what? The reason the Barotseland Agreement, each time you talk about the Barotseland Agreement, including yourself, Lance, you are saying the Barotseland Agreement 1964, isn't it?
Yes.
So the reason you are adding that date is because there were other Barotseland agreements before 64. Several Barotseland agreements
Yes.
from the end of the 1890s, the beginning of the 1900s, right up to 1964. So that there was, in fact, a Barotseland agreement in 1900, which was between the government of Barotseland and the government of Britain. This is the agreement that consolidated all the other treaties, concessions, and other agreements to establish Barotseland as a protectorate.
Okay.
The move towards that agreement and the protectorate status of Barotseland was initiated by the Barotse government. You could say preemptively, because from the 1500s, the 16th century, Africa was being invaded, particularly from Europe, in all directions: West Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, particularly in the 1500s, when the Portuguese engaged with the kingdom of, or the empire of the Congo on the Atlantic Ocean, which is between the borders of the current Congo and Angola. At first, it was just a normal diplomatic relations, a trading relations, but it gradually degenerated. In fact, it was such a good diplomatic and trading relationship that the king of the Bakongo even sent his children to Rome to study, and sent diplomats to Rome and to Portugal. But later on, the Europeans, as became a habit, as later on, they changed the relationship from one of friendship to one of exploitation and conquest, and ultimately even of slave trading. And this is one of the areas, the events that led to a lot of movements of Africans. There was already a movement of Africans across the continent. I won't go into that. From the Nile Valley, from West Africa, but there was then this movement from Central Africa, from Congo, Angola, towards the center of Africa. If you look at the map of Southern Africa, you find that Barotseland is actually at the center of Southern Africa, Southern Central Africa. So if you are running from the Portuguese in Bakongo Kingdom, or in the Angola, or running from Boers and Germans in the south, or running from the Portuguese in Mozambique and Zimbabwe, it was the logical place to meet. So Barotseland as a kingdom was formed by many groups. In fact, Barotseland, from its very foundation, about 400 years ago, was always a multi-ethnic, multilingual, multicultural empire. Of the type of multicultural empires that was typical of the bigger empires in our history of Africa, when you talk about the empire of Ghana, Songhai, Mali, Monomtapa, Azania, these were always multi-ethnic, multilingual. But one of the impacts of British, not even British, but European conquest of Africa was basically to disrupt these kingdoms and disintegrate them and reduce them into mono-ethnic entities for the most part. So as we speak now and over the last 400 years, Barotseland has remained one of the few African kingdoms which was multi-ethnic and multilingual and multicultural from beginning and up to date. If you look at the other kingdoms, African kingdoms, even in Zambia, if you look at the Bemba kingdom, all their people are Bemba, they are Bemba speaking, they have a Bemba culture. If you look at the Chewa, it's the same, they are Chewa only. If you look at the Zulus, they are Zulus only. The Swatis, they are Swatis only. The Mangwatos, they are Mangwatos only. But Barotseland has, from the very beginning and up to date, been a multi-ethnic community under one government, united in diversity. And that history of Barotseland, actually taken positively, should have been used as a model for uniting Zambia as a multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multi-community nation in its building. So, the Barotseland Agreement 1964 was basically an end game of colonialism. At the end of the colonial period, the agreements that we had with the British were coming to an end, and that was an agreement of giving Barotseland a status of a protectorate. Now, as the colonialism was ending, that arrangement had come to an end. So there had to be an exit point. It so turned out that although throughout Barotseland had been maintained as a distinct protectorate on itself, in its own right, administratively, the British chose various supra-governance structures within which to discharge their end of the arrangement for Barotseland's protectorate. At first, they used the British South Africa Company as an agent on their behalf. But the Barotse government was never happy, was never content with that. So from the very beginning, they demanded a direct relationship with the colonial office of the British. They did not want to be governed by a company. And although it took a long time, by 1924, following the delegation led by King Yeta III in 1922 to the British High Commission in Cape Town, where they demanded for the nth time to be relieved of that arrangement. Finally, in 1924, they got what they were asking for. Of course, the rejection of the British South African Company was also a position taken by many other Africans in Northern Rhodesia and Southern Rhodesia, including the European settlers in Rhodesia. They also did not want to be ruled by the company. and they managed to free themselves from the company in 1922 in southern Rhodesia, and in northern Rhodesia and Barotseland managed to free itself from the company in 1924. So that at first, up to 1922, 1924, Barotseland Protectorate was being superintended together with Bechuanaland Protectorate, with Basutoland Protectorate, Swaziland Protectorate, by a High Commissioner, a British High Commissioner to South Africa, not necessarily the South Africa you know today, but you could have said to Southern Africa. And the High Commissioner, under him in each of the protectorates, are the resident commissioner, because each of these protectorates were countries on their own. And this was the case up to 1924 or so. After that, let's say even ahead of that, in the Barotseland Agreement 1900 with the British, Barotseland was administratively attached to northwestern Rhodesia. And it was called Barotseland Northwestern Rhodesia from 1900 until probably 1911, when northwestern Rhodesia was amalgamated with northeastern Rhodesia. Even when Barotseland was being administered together with northwestern Rhodesia, it remained a protectorate under its own agreements, its own entity. It was simply for the convenience of the British that it had a common administrator with northwestern Rhodesia. And from 1924 to 1964, it had a common governor together with the Northern Rhodesian Protectorate. So that the Barotseland Protectorate and Northern Rhodesian Protectorate shared a common colonial governor for the administrative convenience of the British, not for the amalgamation of the two protectorates. The point must be made in the context of Africa that two colonies or two protectorates sharing a common governor was not unique to Barotseland and Northern Rhodesia. Because, as I've indicated, for a long time, up to 1922-24, the British High Commissioner in South Africa was superintending over 4 protectorates: Swaziland, Basutoland, Bechuanaland, and Barotseland. After 1922, the High Commissioner for South Africa, who had shifted from Cape Town to Mafeking, within South Africa but south of the Botswana border, was superintending over 3 separate protectorates: Swaziland, Basutoland, and Bechuanaland. The fact that they had a common British High Commissioner did not make them a single protectorate and did not deny their status as separate protectorate. Also, moving away from Southern Africa, British Cameroon shared a common Governor General with Nigeria while remaining an entity unto itself until 1961. And also, British Togoland shared a common governor with the Gold Coast until 1956, in fact 1956-57, when they formed a new country called Ghana together, in the same way that after 64, Barotseland Protectorate and Northern Rhodesia Protectorate constituted a new country called Zambia. So that is part of the history that needs to be taken into account. Given that background, when the proposition was made that Barotseland Protectorate and Northern Rhodesia Protectorate should go together towards independence and create a new country called Zambia. These two protectorates had to sit down and negotiate how they were going to get together in the new country they were going to create called Zambia. The Barotseland Agreement is the basis of that arrangement, which made Barotseland an integral part of Zambia, which they created together with the Northern Rhodesia Protectorate. So what was the Barotseland Agreement? The Barotseland Agreement 1964 was the foundation document which spelled out how Barotseland Protectorate and Northern Rhodesia Protectorate were going to move forward together towards independence in a new country they were founding called Zambia. And Zambians need to be told that the term, the slogan, the Zambian slogan, One Zambia, One Nation, actually comes from the text of the Barotseland Agreement. The Barotseland Agreement, which was signed in May 1964, 22 weeks before Zambia was born, refers to an objective of creating one country, one nation. 22 weeks later, that country got a name, and that name was Zambia. And that's why it was put in its motto, One Zambia, One Nation, deriving from the text of the Barotseland Agreement. Zambians have been misled that One Zambia, One Nation comes from intermarriage between Ngonis and Bembas. Africans have been intermarrying across ethnic language communities from the beginning of time. We are all mixed. It was not invented in 1964. It was not invented in Zambia. And in any case, you know, when people get married, sometimes those who administer marriage vows end up by telling them that having gotten married, the two shall become one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the two were always one, there would be no need to say that. So if Zambia was, Northern Rhodesia was always one, the new independent country would not need the slogan of being One Zambia, One Nation, because it would be redundant. That is one of the answer to the question of what is the Barotseland Agreement. The other aspect is that while there was this popular proposition that Barotseland and Northern Rhodesia should go forward together to create Zambia, there was another opinion within Barotseland which proposed that Barotseland should go forward to independence on its own, the way a few years later Bechuanaland became Botswana, Lesotholand became Lesotho, Swaziland became Swaziland, Eswatini now. So that the opinion within Barotseland was divided. And the division of opinion was really between a very large number of people who felt that Barotseland was better off going into independence together with Northern Rhodesia to create a new modern democratic country called Zambia. They had too much faith in the United National Independence Party's promises of creating a democratic society with freedom and justice and equality for all. But there was another opinion in Barotseland of people who did not trust UNIP enough to want to be integrated with Northern Rhodesia to move forward. They suspected that they would be betrayed. So given this division of opinion, it became necessary to negotiate. And I believe that the negotiations, which were in a spirit of give and take, came up with a solution, a settlement. And so the other answer to the question, what is the Barotseland Agreement? The Barotseland Agreement was the negotiated settlement of the different opinions in Barotseland. And the settlement was made feasible because within the arrangement, there was a win-win situation, more or less. Those Barotse people, who were a large number, who believed that UNIP would create a democratic country with freedom, justice, and equality for all, and wanted Barotseland to be an integral part of it. In the Barotseland Agreement, they got what they wanted. Those who felt that Barotseland should be independent did not get exactly what they wanted, but whatever they got was sufficient for them to buy into that proposition. And what they got was the assurance in the agreement that the Barotse government, the Litunga Council, would be the principal local government authority for internal affairs in Barotseland. And the Barotseland Agreement actually even spells out the areas of this authority. They mostly cover land and natural resources. They cover cultural affairs. They cover natural resources of all sorts. There is a complete list of that. So it was quite a complete settlement of arising from a give and take negotiation. And the third answer to what is the Barotseland Agreement, the Barotseland Agreement is the foundation of Zambia, in the sense that it required to first settle what would constitute Zambia, whether or not Barotseland would be part of it, before you could move forward to grant independence to Zambia. That is why it was only after the agreement in May 1964 that the British then felt at liberty to move forward and produce a Zambia Independence Act in the British Parliament, which was in July, by the way. So you have May, June, July, 2 months later, having laid the foundation by this agreement called Barotseland Agreement, then the Zambia Independence Act was passed by the British to lay the grounds for Zambia to become independent. The other answer to the Barotseland, what the Barotseland Agreement is found, apart from being found in the text of the Barotseland Agreement itself, which states clearly that the purpose of the Barotseland Agreement was to make Barotseland an integral part of Zambia. So it's a legal instrument for integrating Zambia with Barotseland as an integral part of it. So those are the elaborate answers to just the first question of what is the Barotseland Agreement. I should also mention that the Barotseland Agreement was signed 22 weeks before Zambia's independence. Midpoint to that independence, 11 weeks after the signing of the Barotseland Agreement, Prime Minister of Northern Rhodesia, who was a signatory of the Barotseland Agreement, had occasion to come to Lialui, address a full assembly of Barotse traditional leaders, Indunas, including the king, the Litunga Mwanawina III, in the Kuta and in the Kashandi, the reception hall in the palace. on the 11th of August, 1964. In that address, he committed himself. He gave assurance that the Barotseland Agreement, one, was an honorable agreement, both on the part of the Northern Rhodesia government and the Barotseland Agreement, Barotseland government. By the way, in his speech, he referred to the Barotseland Agreement. He gave assurance that the Barotseland Agreement will be honored after independence. He went further to say that he was going to appoint an under minister in Barotseland whose portfolio, whose function would be a liaison between the Litunga and the prime minister before independence, who will become the president after independence, in order, he said in his own word, to ensure that the Barotseland Agreement is honored. He also went further in that statement to assure the Barotse people that the Zambian government to be was not going to interfere in the internal affairs of Barotseland. He went further to assure that the Litungan Council and his regional principality councils and the whole structure of Barotse government from village level to the Kuta in Namuso in Lialui would remain in charge of land and natural resources. He said the only thing that his government would demand is cooperation. He also said he was sure that this cooperation will continue because it had already been established, and that he also was confident that whatever land was required for development would be granted by the Barotse government so that government projects would go ahead in Northern Rhodesia. That was 11 weeks after signing and 11 weeks before Zambia's independence. So that I've talked too much. Maybe I should give you a chance to answer, because I've just focused on the answering the question elaborately. What is the Barotseland Agreement 1964? The other questions I was saying
actually would mention that
hello?
Would mention that you are really a fountain of knowledge. You know, the way you have elaborated, you know, from the beginning to where you have actually reached, that is very rich indeed. Now, would like to find out, you know, because in this agreement, I can see that there were these, you know, commitments, or rather, you know, duties or responsibilities that could have been in the agreement. And probably there's a party that is not fulfilling, you know, those responsibilities, or a party that probably is in breach of that agreement. What is it that is in the agreement and either party is not actually fulfilling in terms of responsibilities?
It's not either party, because there were two parties. They signed and they believed in it. One party, the Zambian government, once, as I indicated, in many ways, the Barotseland Agreement was the key to the last step for Zambia's independence. If the Barotseland Agreement had not been concluded, it is quite likely that the independence of Zambia would have either been delayed, or the constitution of the territorial constitution of Zambia would have been different. So that there was an interest in those who wanted Zambia to be independent to reach an agreement. It was hoped that they had reached a give and take arrangement and that they will be faithful to their word. But once the UNIP government was in power, particularly, but not only, once its political monopoly was not functioning, once there were political threats within UNIP, and once the Barotse support for UNIP was withdrawn. I should also say that in an election in 1962, the election that led to a coalition government between UNIP and Congress, every seat in Barotseland went to UNIP. That is how much faith the Barotse voters had in UNIP. Again, in the January 1964 elections, January 1964 is before Zambia's independence.
Yes.
Again, every seat in Barotseland went to UNIP. And you would notice that the UNIP which the Barotse people were voting for had a leadership which was inclusive of Barotse people. Indeed, even before UNIP, the politics of Northern Rhodesia, the founder, President General of the Northern Rhodesia African Congress was my own father, Mbikusita-Lewanika, a son of King Lewanika I. So the political cooperation between Barotse people and the people of Northern Rhodesia had a long history. But it should be very well understood that within it was actually the practice that when it came to Northern Rhodesia politics, the cause of African independence in Northern Rhodesia, it was not just Northern Rhodesians who were involved. The Africans who were working in the mines who came from Nyasaland also participated. As you know, everybody knows that President Kaunda's father came from Nyasaland, but that is neither here nor there. But it should also be understood that Mr. Kalua, who stood with President Kaunda for the Secretary Generalship of Congress in 1953, also of Malawi origin. Going much further than that, when my father, at the age of 22, 23, 24, was founder secretary of the Livingstone Welfare Association, African Association. He was secretary to a chairman who was a Mr. Nyirenda, who was from Nyasaland. And further in Southern Africa, our own late dear freedom fighter, Scottawina, when he was a student in Fort Hare, he was a member of the South African National Congress Youth League. So was Mr. Peter Matoka from Northern Rhodesia. So was Henry Chipembele from Nyasaland, who was a student. Going further back, my own grandfather, King Lewanika I, was one of the founding honorary president of the South African National Congress at its founding in 1912 in Bloemfontein. In fact, he was one of the sponsors. He donated money and cattle. I could mention many names of people from different countries in Southern Africa who participated in the struggle of Africans in countries where they went as students or as workers. So it was quite normal that the Barotse workers in Northern Rhodesia joined hands with Northern Rhodesians and other Africans to fight the cause of African political advancement in Northern Rhodesia. So it has a very long history of that in the whole continent. In fact, you could say that, because you could even go further. Azikiwe, the first president of Nigeria, also participated in the politics of Sierra Leone and Liberia, and so on and so forth. So it was quite common. So given this political background, it is also understandable that a large number of Barotse people thought we might as well go together to independence. We fought together, and let's sort out our identities and create a new country called Zambia.
We do appreciate that rich information that you are giving. Now, would like to find out, upon realizing the leadership of Barotseland, upon realizing that Northern Rhodesia was not fulfilling the obligations that were expected of them as per agreement. What did they do? Did they do anything? Did they keep quiet? Or what did they, how did they react? What did they do about it?
Yes, I think let me pick up the thread from where we left off. So after independence, I was explaining that in the election of 62, 64, the Barotse people supported UNIP. But in 1967, within the UNIP party at Mulungushi, all the Barotse leaders, except Scott Awina, who was allowed to retain a position in the Central Committee and opposed, were defeated. The first leader of the Women's League of UNIP, Princess Nakatindieta, was defeated. The first finance minister of Northern Rhodesia, Arthur Wina, was defeated. The first secretary general of ZANC, the Zambia African National Congress, and ultimately secretary general of UNIP, Muyukayo Mbwaspalo, who was the first person among the well-known leaders to break away from Haring Kumbula, even before the Kapwepwes and the Kamangas and others broke away, was defeated. So I think that was the last blow to show that, as I said at the beginning, the Barotse people are divided between those who had not enough faith in UNIP and therefore were hesitant to go into an integrated Zambia, and those who had too much faith in UNIP to go ahead. On balance, those who had too much faith in UNIP got what they wanted. Therefore, you can imagine the big letdown that this integration, this political movement, United National Independence Party, a freedom movement, a democratic movement, which promised freedom, justice, and equality, which they had banked so much in that they were ready to turn their backs against Barotseland and deposited faith in UNIP, and then they were rejected. So that when the election came after that rejection in 67, the next election was in December 1968. The Barotse people who had all along supported UNIP joined forces with the African National Congress. I should also say that one of the Barotse nationals who was at the forefront of the freedom struggle of Northern Rhodesia, Narumino Mundia, he was even nicknamed in the freedom struggle as Jesus, because he was famously held one-man demonstrations at the High Court, fasting, He was dismissed from the UNIP government in 1966. No, yeah. So very shortly after independence. So he ended up joining a party called United Party. Many Zambians think that he founded it. In fact, they think the United Party was a Barotseland party. It was actually founded by Mr. Barrington Lombe. We have many common names between Barotseland and Lubemba. Lombe is not one of them. He was the founder of the United Party. And by the way, somehow Mr. Barrington Lombe disappeared. I don't know if anybody knows what happened to him. So Mundia joined that party, then he was picked as the leader, and then he began championing because of the Barotse people who were disappointed with UNIP. There was also an economic disappointment with UNIP because many Barotse people, particularly from Kalabo, were suppliers of migrant labor in South Africa, like Botswana, like Lesotho, like Swaziland, like Temboland, Kosaland in South Africa. These African kingdoms were suppliers of labors to the mines. We know that the condition of labor was not very good. We know the racism, but in terms of incomes that they got, countries like Swaziland, Lesotho, Botswana, and Barotseland depended very much on the earnings of those people. So abruptly in 1966, coinciding with the departure of Mundia from UNIP, President Kaunda unilaterally, without consultation, without preparation, just declared cutting off that labor supply. It should be understood that political leaders, African political leaders like Seretse Khama, were also against the apartheid. African leaders like Liabua Jonathan in Lesotho, they were also against apartheid. Even King Sobu in Swaziland, he was against apartheid. But they could only disengage carefully because the livelihood of their people depended on it. In the case of Zambia, we disengaged carelessly without planning. So those who lost their job opportunities added to the aggrieved Barotse people against UNIP. And Mundia capitalized in organizing these aggrieved Barotse people into the United Party. And because of the effectiveness of their organization, it was banned. After the United Party was banned, ahead of the 1968 elections, they changed their strategy. They decided to go into an alliance with the African National Congress to have their candidates start on the tickets of the African National Congress and to have Mundia as vice president of the African National Congress. This alliance between the United Party and the African National Congress managed to defeat UNIP in Barotseland and in Southern Province. I think in the election of December 68, UNIP only won 2 seats in Southern Province and in Barotseland, having been winning all the seats in Barotseland. So that as a result, as a reaction to this withdrawal of Barotse support, when President Kaunda was forming his cabinet in January 1969, particularly when he appointed Mr. Justin Chimba as Minister of Commerce, he warned him that if he hears that he has renewed the business licenses of the Barotse people who have won elections in Barotseland, he should consider himself fired.
Wow.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
So that this was the environment of vengeance against Barotseland for you utilizing their democratic rights to vote or not to vote for a party of their choice. So when Parliament met in 69, it embarked on a mission of vengeance against Barotseland, but not only against Barotseland, also vengeance against democracy in Zambia altogether. Because by 69, it was quite clear that within UNIP itself, apart from the Barotse part, you've heard about the night without a president. I won't go into that detail today. But one of the factors was that at this 1967 Mulungushi conference, where the majority of Barotse lost seats, Mr. Mwansaka Pwepwe became vice president of UNIP and automatically vice president of Zambia. He came within a heartbeat away from the presidency of Zambia. Not everybody in UNIP was happy with that. So apart from embarking on a vengeance against Barotseland, they embarked on a vengeance against Kapwepwe. They started the move towards a one-party state. And they put forward a referendum over which they campaigned dishonestly and deceitfully. They campaigned for a referendum to end all referendums. And the idea was that when the Barotseland Agreement was negotiated, when the Zambia Independence Act was negotiated, it was a give and take situation. UNIP did not get everything it wanted.
Okay.
Because this package of independence dispensation provided for respect and recognition of the opposition, particularly the leader of opposition. It provided for a multi-party system. But after the election result of 1968, it became quite clear that if the multi-party system was going to continue, UNIP could not guarantee winning the elections. Although they won the majority of seats in 1968, the opposition party gained the seats, the number of seats in that parliament. And more critically, 30 of the seats that UNIP won were won unopposed. And the maneuver to get those seats unopposed included violence and intimidation and the physical prevention of ANC candidates filing their nomination. So you can imagine, despite massive intimidation, they were beginning to lose support in parliament. This is what motivated them to move very fast towards a one-party state. And this is what motivated to move very fast to abrogating the Barotseland Agreement. So those who want to understand... Yes?
Sorry to cut you short, Wondate Aka.
No. I prefer us to have a conversation.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I want us to come to, this same issue of the abrogation of the Barotseland Agreement of 1964 through the pushing of the referendum of 1969. When this was happening, why did you were saying something?
You see, I've said that the 1969 referendum was deceitful.
Yes, yes. So
They did not say what they wanted changed in the constitution. They simply wanted to remove the provision of the constitution which said every change in the constitution must be put forward to a national referendum, and it must get the approval of more than 50% of eligible voters, not just registered voters. You know, the number of voters who register is always less than eligible voters, and the number of people who actually vote is always less than those who registered. So
Yes.
this referendum clause said it had to get more than 50%, not only of those who actually vote, not only of those who have registered to vote, but all those who are eligible to vote. Now, for you to win such a referendum, you have to put forward a proposal which is popular to everybody. It has to be win-win. So rather than come up with the proposal of what they wanted changed in the constitution, they zeroed on that. And they campaigned deceitfully that the reason they wanted this removal was because it was imposed by imperialists and it was preventing them from empowering Zambians economically. It was stopping them from distributing land, particularly in southern province, which were all lies. I should say that in that referendum, let me just finish. In that referendum, the majority of people in Barotseland voted no against the proposition of removing the powers of the people as a whole over the constitution in favor of giving that power to parliament, which always acts on a partisan line, which is always under a party whip and always does the dictates of the president. But the majority of Zambians were deceived. They voted yes, disempowered themselves in favor of a parliament which was dictated to by one party, dictated to by one person. Now, once they had this blank slate to change the constitution, and since then, up to date, Zambia has been molesting, changing the constitution left, right, and center, not in win-win outcomes, but against some people, for some people, along partisan line, along personalized issues. And now, so that using this blank sheet of paper, they were able to impose a one-party state without going back to the people for a referendum. They were able to abrogate the Barotseland Agreement without consulting anybody because the people of Zambia had given a blank slate to change the constitution of Zambia. You were, I think, asking me, what did the Barotse people do? First and foremost, it almost makes me cry when I read the record of how many times the Litunga, the Kuta, the Ngambelas pleaded with UNIP, pleaded with President Kaunda not to destroy this agreement which made us one country before it was done. And after it was done, they continued petitioning. And after it was done, those who were petitioning were jailed. Old people were jailed. And I have an uncle of mine who was probably 90 years old. He was sent to Porokoso in detention over this issue in 1969. So that since 1969, you can count the number of years in less than your one hand since Zambia's independence, when nobody has been harassed by the police, harassed by the court, imprisoned, detained over this question. And all these people have been harassed, who've been detained, have been protesting politically, not militarily. They haven't been killing anybody. They have not taken to arms, they've just taken to their tongues and their pens. So that the impression that
sorry, not really, to cut you short, but I also want you, as you are responding to this, I also want you to zero in this factor. So after when leaders or the leadership of Barotseland noticed that the agreement has been abrogated and that referendum was passed through the pretense of what was pretended, according to the agreement, I've read the agreement, and according to the agreement, the people of Barotseland, they have the right, to justice and for legal redress in this issue. So after seeing that this thing was the referendum, the agreement was abrogated, why didn't they seek for legal representation, or why didn't they go to the courts?
which court? you see, the Barotseland agreement is talking about the Zambian High Court. Okay, so I think that Barotse people should be commended for having chosen to protest politically, for having chosen to protest and to demand dialogue rather than conflict. You know, if you go to court, there's always a loser and a winner, right? So wise leaders would prefer to reach consensus agreement so that there is no winner and no loser. Indeed, one of the characteristics of the Barotseland agreement was that it was a negotiated settlement from a long-drawn process of dialogue. And it was within the Barotse traditional culture of seeking consensus rather than these unilateral ways of governance, which Zambia has shown us from beginning. It's not the way forward. Dialogue is the answer. Consensus is the answer. And now you are tormenting Barotse people for not having taken arms. You are tormenting them for not having gone to court. You are not commending them for still retaining faith in dialogue. And given the state of Africa, my brother, for you to have Africans who still and genuinely believe in dialogue, despite being aggrieved, is something you should thank God for. Not something you should laugh at or mock or use an excuse for suppressing people. I should say that also in answer to what the Barotse people did politically. I would advise people to read the record of the Parliament of 1969 from beginning to end in order to understand what is wrong with Zambia. All the ingredients of what's wrong with Zambia are packed there, particularly over the abrogation of Barotse. The whole debate is there. Mr. Mfaya Mumbuna pleaded in a long debate for this act which tears what puts us together apart not to be done. It was ignored. The whole African National Congress pleaded in Parliament for UNIP not to do it. They did it because they had the numbers. They did it because they have the police. They did it because they have the army. They did it because they are popular. They did it because they could go get away with it with impunity, covered up by lies.
Well, thank you so much for that Wondate Aka. And of course, to you, our dear viewers, you are watching Meet Your Leaders on Ubuntu channel. This is a program that comes your way every Wednesday as we get to bring different leaders so that we can teach one another or get to educate one another on matters that border on our future. And this evening's discussion is the Barotseland Agreement, talking about the truths and deception. And our guest is none other than Akashambatwa Mbikusita-Lewanika. And to go on with another question, maybe this time around, allow me, Wondate Aka, to bring in the issue of a clause in the Zambian constitution that talks about the Zambian citizenship. And you will agree with me that actually it should be Article 4 of the constitution, the Zambian constitution, that talks about the citizenship of a Zambian person or citizens of Zambia. I'm trying to look for it. So here it is, and allow me to quote Article 4. Yeah, so Article 4 and sub-Article 33, which talks about a person who was a Zambian, who was a citizen of Zambia immediately before the commencement of this constitution shall continue to be a citizen of Zambia and shall retain the same citizenship category from the date the citizenship was acquired. Moving on to 34, citizenship may be acquired by birth, descent, registration, or adoption in accordance with this part. So 35(1) says a person born in Zambia is a citizen by birth if at the date of that person's birth at least one parent of the person is or was a Zambian. End of quote. Then coming to the agreement that was signed or part of the Barotseland Agreement of 1964 as of May, there's a part which talks about the Constitution of the Republic. This is Article 2 of that agreement. It says, the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia shall include the provisions agreed upon for inclusion therein at the Constitutional Conference held in London in May 1964 relating to A, the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms of the individual rather, B, the judiciary, and C, the public service. End of quote. Now, my question, Wondate, comes on if suffice that Zambia and Barotseland get to part ways, looking at this citizenship clause of the Zambian constitution, what would be the consequences of agreeing to the request of the people of Barotseland, and what would it mean to the rest of Zambians? Would this really be fair?
No, you are alarming yourself for nothing. Nobody is supposed to be a citizen. Listen, Guy Scott is a Zambian citizen, isn't it? And also the citizenship clauses by the way, the fourth clause you are talking about is of a new constitution, because in the original constitution, the fourth clause was about ensuring the one-party state. No, the fourth clause we removed in 1991 was about the one-party state. So this is the new constitution. First and foremost, you see, you should read this together with the Ngulube Supreme Court judgment over the Chiluba case, which I think is named after me, I think. Lewanika versus Chiluba or something. Huh? And they elaborated the provision of Zambian citizenship in the independence dispensation, which meant that almost anybody can be Zambian. if your father would have been Zambian and he remained in Mufulira mine, you could also be a Zambian. It's a matter of choice. It's a provision. It's a very liberal provision. So there is nobody who wants to be Zambian who should be denied the Zambian citizenship on that ground. I don't see how the citizenship come in.
Okay, so the citizenship comes in at looking at what are the consequences. Okay, what are the consequences of Zambia agreeing to, leave Barotseland to be its own state or kingdom, and Zambia also standing as its own state? What are the consequences? Because, for example,
I think, okay, I'll come to that, but you see, there should be a question you should ask before that. What have been the consequences of abrogating the Barotseland Agreement, which integrated Barotseland with Zambia? And who did it? Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? If it's a bad thing, who are these bad guys? Who are they? If you love Zambia so much, if you love and integrated so much, you should be more concerned about these, sorry, I may even use wrong words, those who destroyed the bond that was negotiated for us to be together. Don't destroy the bonds that put us together and then ask me what are the consequences of your action by destroying the bonds that put us together. If you did not destroy the Barotseland Agreement, all these questions would not arise. There was a settlement. The Barotseland Agreement was a settlement. Its abrogation was a destruction of that settlement. It was a solution, a give and take solution, a win-win solution. And it was destroyed by people you still think are your freedom fighters. You think those are the uniters of Zambia. They are the ones who've destroyed Zambia. Before we talk on the consequences of destroying Zambia, let us focus who the hell destroyed Zambia. And for what? For personal power, for partisan power, for dishonest reasons. That to me makes me mad.
All right. Thank you so much. Shortly, we'll be engaging our viewers to read their messages as well as allow them into the studio. Producer, if we can have the link shared so that we can at least accommodate one or two people in the studio and get to listen to them, get also to have a one-on-one interaction with our guest this evening. Now, Woaka, what would be the lasting solution that should be done in order for us
truth. The lasting solution is the truth. The truth. The truth. The truth. Facts of what is the Barotseland Agreement. What are the facts? Who destroyed it? What are the facts? If we can face the truth, face the facts, then we are moving to a solution. We can't have a solution while we are in denial of the truth.
So how does one attain this truth? Where
What have I told you which is untrue? What have you learned about the Barotseland Agreement which is untrue? That's what you have to sort out. You've been lied to. You've been lied to. You've been told that there was a referendum in '63. That's a lie. There was no such referendum. You've been told that Barotseland and Northern Rhodesia were one country, which is a lie. You've been told that those who destroyed it are the unifiers of Zambia. That's a lie. until you expose these lies and turn your back against those lies, you will not be facing the solution.
How about the BNC 2012? Is that also a lie?
What about it?
Well, you've talked about the referendum being a lie, and obviously things that you have listed. How about the BNC
No, of course,
2012?
of course, the National Council took place. But what came first, the National Convention or the breaking of the Barotseland Agreement? Which caused what? Did you break up the Barotseland Agreement because of the convention or the conference that took place in 2012? Did that make you break it in 1969? What came first? Who are the culprits? What is the culprit situation? People who are aggrieved. People who are aggrieved. I think in all our Bantu language, there is a saying that when you are listening to people who are crying, don't look into their mouth. They are mourning. Find out why they are crying. What is paining them? Who caused the pain? You can't just tell a baby that you are making noise when somebody is beating him up.
Well, our viewers,
I would like to find out, from the senior man here. Is this agreement reconcilable by the parties, considering that for a long time it has not been revered by especially one party? Is it reconcilable? Can it be effected? Can it be respected as we stand now?
Well, I think, well, what you see, I don't know how to answer that, but let me put it this way: that you see, if any problem has a cancerous nature, you understand. If it remains unsolved, it becomes worse, isn't it?
Yes.
The Barotseland Agreement was entered into it in good faith, at least on one side. Huh? As I told you, the conflict in Barotseland was between those who had no faith in UNIP and those who had too much faith in UNIP. Those who had faith in UNIP won the day. Now, once they are betrayed, it's a different game. Then it means those who are really interested in the unity of Zambia, one, they have to stop victimizing the victims. Two, they have to face the truth. Three, they have to condemn those who destroyed Zambia. Three, then they have to assure those who have been betrayed, whose faith was betrayed, that there must be some other way of guaranteeing that this time round, whatever we agree with, there will be no betrayal. And you know, a betrayal of faith is a very dangerous thing. Yes, you are right to ask. Once you've betrayed people, once you've made them lose faith in you, repairing that faith is not easy. But with sincerity, with preparedness to face the truth, there is hope. But with avoiding the truth, there is no hope.
All right, we do have, messages, Lance. We do have messages. I think we can go right ahead and read them. Let me just read probably two or so, then you take it up. We have this one coming from Daniel Lenganji Zulu. Okay, that one has gone. This one is coming from
Ikandulwa.
Ikandulwa. Yeah, Sinu. Ikandulwa Sinu. This is what Zambians should know. We do not call our country Western Province. We know it is. We know it. We know it as the Kingdom of Barotseland. Western is a campus term in geography which is fictitious and elusive, whereas Barotseland is a name. As a name is a reality. The country called Zambia is plastic and artificial, whereas Barotseland is natural and organic. Barotseland is a state. As a state, had been in existence long before Northern Rhodesia came into a dream, and not to mention the toddler Zambia, the Zambian construction of one. All right, thank you so much there. That's coming from Sinu. Again, the purpose of the Barotseland Agreement 1964 was to preserve the autonomy of Barotseland within an independent state of Zambia. Thank you so much. We do appreciate, for that message. And another one here is coming from Ndate Mongoli. Everything agreed was breached by GRZ. They dismantled the Barotseland government. That is where the problem is. The agreement was signed to preserve that government. Thank you so much, Ndate, there. We do appreciate for your contribution. I'll throw it to you, Lance, to take it up and read a couple of messages there.
All right, thank you so much. And please, Aka, be patient as we try to read as many messages as possible.
I'm at home. You are the one who's probably not at home.
Definitely.
I hope you can see me.
We definitely can. Anyway, let's get to read one from
what you are seeing in the background is what I call home, so I'm comfortable.
Okay. So Ikandula comes back and says internal law cannot be used as an excuse of failing to honor a treaty. Ikandula, thank you so much for coming through. He comes back and says you go to court for interpretation, not for abrogating the agreement. Obviously, responding to the question I earlier asked. Let's go through another message that is coming through right there. All right, Ikandulwa is very busy today. He says, and the Barotseland case has been in the High Court of Zambia and indeed in the Supreme Court of Zambia through the Afumba Mombotwa treason case, and the Zambian High Court has deemed self-determination as a criminal act. Thank you so much, Ikandulwa. Quickly, another one that comes back and says, Barotseland cannot be held up by Zambia anymore. We are sister nations. There is no way one nation can abuse another in such a way. Zambia is afraid of the huge sums of money they will pay. Ndate, thank you so much for that contribution. Quickly, let's have another one. Auxilia comes through and says, seeing that the government of Zambia has failed to keep to the agreement. Okay, I'm sure they should be where it's starting from, and this is the last part. I'm sure this is the starting point. What then is the appeal going beyond the government to the general public that now wants to keep the peace, yet want to see the issue resolved? Okay, then the continuation is from the previous one read. Quickly, let's accommodate another one. So Ndate comes back and says, you are still in denial after all the truth being told by Aka. He is just saying that Barotseland have tried to be Zambians in good faith, and this man is a heir to the Litungaship. Thank you so much, Ndate, for that. We really appreciate. Laura comes and says, Lewanika, I am loving and enjoying this broadcast. Very informative. Kindly position your camera to show your face properly. Too bad the 1969 referendum gave power to politicians instead of us. All right. Thank you so much, Laura. Wowaka, there's a request that they are not seeing your face.
You are supposed to guide me. What should I do?
Uh, well, I think tilt
Anyway, it's
your
a bit
phone.
late.
Yeah, it's a bit late anyway. We are in the dying minutes. Ndate comes and says, we cannot trust Zambia anymore. Our union has failed. All we want is freedom from Zambia. Ndate, thank you so much. Let's read 5 last messages and then we call it quits. All right. Mutolo Njekwa says, I salute the people of Barotseland. KK betrayed us, but we are determined to prove a point. Thank you so much, Njekwa, for that. 4 more remaining. Director, do we have 4 more? Can we go to another one? Well, it appears that our director is unable to bring the other 4 more, but allow me, if I can, to read direct. So they are messages, or there's a message coming through from John Sililo. He says, Ubuntu channel, I am asking if you can bring people from other tribes. How do they know about Barotseland? Okay. Well, Gabriel, we didn't skip your comment. I didn't see it. Thank you so much. Okay, one last one. Okay, I'm trying. Okay, so Gabriel says Wondate categorically state the betray. Ndate Mongoli categorically state betrayal. Okay, thank you so much for that. Anyway, time is not our best ally, and Wondate Aka, let me give you this opportunity. Either your appeal or your comments, your last comments to both our viewers as well as the people of Zambia.
Well, thank you very, very much. Obviously, you can't exhaust this topic, but I hope that we have done justice to it. The discussion should continue, and a commitment to finding out the facts would be appreciated. And as I've said, the truth will set us free.
Are you there, sir?
Yes, I'm through. That's enough. Thank you very much. Let's hope there will be
Okay,
other
all right. So I would like
opportunities.
to
I appreciate
would like
your this opportunity, and I've noted the comments. Let's continue talking.
And before I let you go, I know you have already done your concluding remarks. We had a message from Ndate who is saying, Barotseland has been betrayed, and the way forward is actually, freedom from Zambia. Just your comments before I let you go, sir.
Well, I think that statement stands on its own. As I said, we all have the freedom to have our own opinion, but we don't have the freedom to have our own choice of facts. Given the same facts, we are free to take our different opinions. But I think that those who really, genuinely want a united Zambia have let us down, because they've avoided identifying the problem and facing up to the problem, and they keep wishing that the problem will go away on its own. It will never go away on its own. It will never go away on its own. and there's a limit to allowing a problem to continue unresolved. It has to move forward.
Mhm.
So we have wasted 5 decades by entertaining lies. And up to now, I'm not hearing clear voices which are committed to the truth.
Mhm.
And without truth, the situation is hopeless.
Sir, we are so grateful for actually according us the chance to actually hear from you. And just like I earlier indicated, you are a fountain of knowledge and definitely will come back knocking at your door. Just like you said, facts be told, and facts can only be taught by people that hold the facts indeed, and the truth will definitely be spread. We greatly appreciate for having you, and it's been a great show with you here. And we are so grateful even to the viewers and listeners out there that have been participating, including those that have just silently, been viewing or following this program. Lance, thank you so much. I also do appreciate, you've been tuning in. This has been your program, Meet Your Leaders, right here on Ubuntu channel. My name is Chaza, and we are saying God bless you all.
Thank you.